Next up is a speaker who has been absolutely tireless in her pursuit of truth. In fact, reading her Twitter feed is pretty exhausting when you see just how much she gets up to. So she's been absolutely dogged in trying to find out the truth about how data was used and misused in the EU referendum by Cambridge Analytica and others, and crucially where the money really came from. And despite an orchestrated online trolling campaign against her, she has received several awards for her investigative journalism, and she is still fighting to uncover the full truth. Please welcome Carole Cadwalladr.
Okay. Thank you very much. So it has been revealed that I'm quite nervous about the technology here, and I'm not entirely sure I'm going to work this PowerPoint correctly, so forgive me. But thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much, Henry, for organising. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm normally sitting at my kitchen table, gently despairing and railing at the dog, so it's good for me to come out and rail at somebody else. And I'm kind of unnaturally cheerful at the moment, which I was just shocking people in the green room. Normally, I'm all about the dystopia and the gloom. But I really did get cheered up that we live in a country that yesterday, it welcomed who we call the leader of the free world. And this is how we greeted him. And I am so thrilled. I felt really proud to be British, and I thought, yes, we've got some fighting spirit. It's not all a disaster. And then I got even more cheered up because somebody immediately corrected it for me in my Twitter feed. Oh, now you're getting it. Now you get. It's not a three-leaf clover. No. So, and I'm also delighted that Donald Trump is in the country. I just wish he could come to Britain, Britain more often, because I think having Donald Trump here reminding us of who his friends are and who his allies are is a very, very useful thing for us. So, Donald, please, if you're out there, please come every week, as far as I'm concerned, and let us see you. Let the people in Britain, let them show their alliances. Because the problem, I feel, one of the many problems is that we have in Britain is that we look at Brexit as if it's about this thing up here, as if it's going on in Westminster, and that's how it gets reported on very much. And it's all about Britain and Brexit and this tiny bubble, and it's if we're making the decisions here. And actually, so much of what is happening at a global scale, and it's happening in this place immediately below it, which is Menlo Park, Facebook's headquarters in Silicon Valley. And I suspect that a lot of you are here because you feel very passionate about Europe and Brexit and the European Union. And I am here for a different reason, which is that I'm very passionate about rule of law, and that this is not about politics. I feel very strongly that what is happening at the moment is much, much more serious than just politics. And it is an attack upon our national sovereignty and upon rule of law. And so, I can't remember what my next thing is, which is why I have the slides to remind me. So, this global connections, which we see, that the same forces are happening all across the world, and the same authoritarians, the same populists are being mediated by these tech platforms. And I'm just going to scroll through this group of people here play a pivotal role in this story. And I just want to get to this slide here, which is 25 yards down the road, Pret-a-Manger. And that was where, so Andy Wigmore, who's pictured here next to Farage, we sat down in that Pret-a-Manger, and he showed me those photos on his phone. He'd just come back from the inauguration, and he laid it out. He laid out these links between Brexit and Trump. And those are still mostly being ignored in Britain. Andy Wigmore, he was the one who sat down in the Pret-a-Manger, and he laid it all out, the connections between the same group of people in America and in Britain. And he was the one who told me about the role of Cambridge Analytica. And he said to me, the key thing, I've got my picture of my Petri dish. Because what Andy Wigmore told me is that this idea that Brexit was the petri dish for Trump, and it's up to you who you decide if this bacteria represents anybody. That's for you, not for me to say, not for me to say. Very, very central in this story are these two people, and they're very central in the story of Trump and in Brexit. So Steve Bannon on the right here, he was the vice president of Cambridge Analytica, and he was the editor-in-chief of Breitbart. And we know that on the day Article 50 was triggered, Nigel Farage was interviewed by Breitbart, and he said, "Thank you to Steve Bannon, and thank you to Breitbart. This wouldn't have been possible without you." And the thing I kind of always come back to in this story is that although there's an awful lot of like scrabbling around and trying to find people to speak to you and finding emails and sources and all the rest of it, there's so much of it which is just out in the open and it's in plain sight. And that is one of the things which was in plain sight. The role of Steve Bannon and his benefactor, Robert Mercer, and that money which went into Cambridge Analytica and into Breitbart, and what Nigel Farage said was a pivotal role in Brexit. This is also in plain sight. You can see this article is more than 5 years old, it says. 2014, Nigel Farage asked who the politician he most admires in the world, and he says it's Vladimir Putin. And we know that Nigel Farage's voting record in the European Union is also very, very pro-Russian. This is not hidden. We don't need to uncover this. We just have to pay attention to it. I'm just going to scoot forward. This was an article which I published. It's more than 2 years ago. And it was about the links between Trump and Brexit and Russia. And none of those have been disproved. It's all worse, actually, than what was originally published in there. This diagram was something I thought I'd put up because, again, there's nothing here which, this was 2 years ago that this was out there. And this role, I just thought it was interesting because this role, so Cambridge Analytica was the company which was used by Nigel Farage's Leave EU campaign, and Aggregate IQ by Boris Johnson's. And, of course, the two very separate campaigns. Yet, here they are back in the news again. They kind of went away for a bit. But now it is really about Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. And this was Trump 2 days ago, singing both of their praises. So again, it's linking back. We're really, really closely entwined with what is happening in America. Anyway, when I went back and I was just like digging out that article, just thinking, what shall I say today? And I noticed I had these quotes at the start of it that I'd forgotten about, and I just did think was quite interesting, and I thought I might talk a little bit about. So the first quote is from Alex Younger, who is the head of MI6. And in December 2016, so a year after the presidential election, he made this really extraordinary speech. And he talked about the attack upon British democracy and how it was being mediated by these new forms of technology. And I spoke to this sort of senior defense person at the time, and he said there was something really, really odd about this speech because it's not MI6's job to safeguard us internally. That's MI5's job. And he asked, was it a signal? What was kind of going on there? The thing why this sort of struck me again is because twice in the last year, Ben Bradshaw has asked in the House of Commons Theresa May whether she blocked an investigation into Arron Banks in 2016 when she was Home Secretary. And Theresa May has refused to answer that question. And I think that's really significant, because if politicians can deny something, they do deny it. And she didn't deny it. So there's a real question mark there over who knew what, and what the intelligence services were doing. And I come back to that question because when Boris Johnson was asked about possible Russian interference in Britain, when he was Foreign Secretary, He said he hadn't seen not a sausage. There was not a sausage. There was no sign of that. And that was our foreign secretary talking. And MI6 reported to him. And he was foreign secretary from June 2016. He was foreign secretary when Sir Alex Younger made that extraordinary speech as the head of MI6, warning us about the threat to Britain. And he was foreign secretary when, as we now know, Arron Banks was continuing to go into the Russian embassy. So this was a story that I did with Peter Jukes, who's coming up next, last summer. And that was when we discovered there was this covert relationship between Arron Banks and between the Russian government. And we discovered that in the same week that they launched the Leave EU campaign, shown here, on the far right is Brittany Kaiser of Cambridge Analytica, Jerry Gunster in the middle there, Arron Banks. In that week, they were inside the Russian embassy 2 times. And on the second time, they were being offered this gold and diamond deal. So we now know that. But we also know that these meetings continued after Brexit. So from June 2016, Arron Banks and Andy Wigmore were continuing with these covert meetings. And they were also traveling back and forward to America. They were campaigning for Trump. And we know that in the summer of 2016, the FBI were aware of Russian attempts upon American democracy. The Five Eyes knew this. I'm sorry, it's a bit technical. But it's so Boris Johnson, who MI6 reported to, knew this. The embassies are under, the one thing we know the intelligence services do is checking who are going in and outside of these embassies. So I think Boris Johnson, that cannot be correct when he said he had seen not a sausage. And I don't know, sorry, I don't know if I'm pitching this at the right level, but I should just carry on blindly a little bit. The reason, I suppose what I'm saying to you is that this stuff is out there. So these bits of information are all out there, and it's just, as I say, like even going back, you see these things, and you start to ask these questions, because again, it is Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage who are the kind of coming men who, and there are all these questions about the past. So I'm just going to show you, sorry, this is just very quickly. The person they were visiting inside the Russian embassy was the Russian ambassador. This is an extract from the first indictment that Robert Mueller unsealed, where he talked about the Russian ambassador being a conduit between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. That's there in black and white. So whatever was going on with Arron Banks and Andy Wigmore, it was meeting with this person. And Nigel Farage said that he'd never met the ambassador. Here he is with them. Doesn't have a great memory, because when he was caught coming out of the Ecuadorian embassy and he was asked what he was doing in there on the steps of the embassy, he said he couldn't remember what he was doing there either. I'm just going to skip forward. I don't know how much time. Have I got 5 minutes? I'm a bit unclear. Let me just go forward. So I'm just going to sort of skip to the end and say, there are these investigations now which are going on into these multiple crimes that we know took place during the referendum. So this was, the Electoral Commission did a year-long investigation into Leave EU spending returns. It started after the very first article that we published on Cambridge Analytica. They referred that to the Met Police, what's the date there? May 2018. Nothing. We've heard nothing of that. It's been with the Met for over a year now. Nothing. Then this one, Vote Leave. So this was Shamir, who's coming on in a moment. This was Shamir's amazing evidence which led to this investigation. That was July 2018. That was referred to the Met Police. Nothing. Again, that was after a full investigation to a criminal level of proof. This is still ongoing. The ICO's investigation into Arron Banks' use of data, still ongoing. And then this one, the big one, the National Crime agency's investigation into where Aaron Banks gets his money from. And I think there's sort of a certain amount of hope that, you know, this is our version of the FBI, and if anybody can get to the bottom of this, then it's them. And so I think there is a sort of a certain amount of hope that maybe we'll find out the truth about where his money comes from. But I actually think we just really can't assume that. And the money's offshore for a reason. It's in offshore, dark jurisdictions. And I sort of personally am of the view that the law is not going to save us, and the regulators aren't necessarily going to save us. And so it really is kind of up to us to save ourselves. Because this is out there already. We know already that they broke the law in multiple ways. We know already that Russia tried to attack our democracy. We know that the Russian government offered money to Aaron Banks. And so there's still question marks, there's still a lot of question marks, but there is enough serious information out there for us to be seriously concerned, not just about the result of the referendum, but also the ongoing consequences of this, the ongoing distortions of this dark money in what is happening right now. Anyway, I'm going to skip to the end. Oh no, this is a good bit. Just let me give you this bit. This is a good bit. When I interviewed Aaron Banks 2 years ago, I asked him about this offshore stuff and like how it's impossible to know where his wealth comes from. And I said, what about this offshore stuff? And he said, diamond mines. And I said, so the argument is that diamond mines are the perfect vehicle for money laundering because you own the entire flipping supply chain. So you own it from the mine to the shop, so you could just chuck in some extra diamonds. Aaron, but that's pure speculation. Me, yeah, it's pure speculation. Aaron laughs. You haven't got a clue if that's true or not. Which is not a denial. I just want to point that out. Anyway, I'm going to skip right forward, and I'm just going to end it here. We started on a giant penis, and we're going to end with Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage are the two pivotal figures who are going to impact what happens next in the next critical months, and that's the rest of Britain's future. And the cavalry isn't coming. And it's really about, it's about the law cannot save us. We need to make the moral case, and we need to make the political case. And we have to say, maybe the NCA cannot prove where Aaron Banks' money comes from, but nor can Aaron Banks. And this money, this foreign money, should be nowhere near British politics, and it is all over it. And we are the ones who have Nigel Farage's arguments most compelling. This is about sovereignty. It really is. And we need to protect our sovereignty and our laws. And we need to get rid of this. We need to stand up to this foreign money and foreign influence. And we need the truth about what happens. And we need to just... Yes, whatever.